Welcome everybody to our latest episode of Agentic SaaS Talks. It's a really fun and interesting topic that we're diving into today. We're going to talk about the future of DBaaS and AI's impact on data as it relates to cloud and how the DBaaS services are going to be evolving to meet those challenges. We are joined by three eminent experts in the field. Markus, who works for AWS, helping startups throughout EMEA, leads a lot of community groups over there on building new startups and going to the cloud. Kamal Gupta, CEO of Omnistrade. Kamal was one of the OGs in DBaaS. He was either one of the first engineers or the first engineer on a lot of the core DBaaS services that people take for granted today. And our guest star today is Subbu. And so Subbu, I'm going to actually let you kind of introduce yourself today.
Subbu Ramarao, I cover worldwide go-to-market for open source relational databases at AWS. So very excited to be here and talking about a topic that is very close to my heart and the rest of the folks on this call as well.
So what role is, especially the open source databases, playing in that world, and kind of what are those trends that you're seeing?
Hey, Michael, thank you so much for the question. So I believe databases and data are center stage for any conversation around AI based on all the excitement that is happening with the Agentic as well. I think AI is fundamentally reshaping how applications interact with databases. And we need to think big about these architectural shifts because they have a meaningful impact. So let me break this down possibly into three disruptive access patterns that we are seeing as we work with customers, right? The first one is vector similarity search at scale. Applications now perform semantic searches across millions of embeddings instead of exact match queries. And this is having a huge impact, right? We are seeing approximate nearest neighbor searches that require specialized indexing. So customers' queries like, hey, can you find a similar product now translates into vector distance calculations across high dimensional space. This is very different compared to the access patterns of the past, right? So, for example, one LATAM customer in the banking space, in the digital banking space, they process millions of vector similarity searches every day to frame product recommendations and also for fraud analytics, right? So, and this requires a fundamentally different optimization strategy as you think about databases, right? So that is the first one, how vector similarity searches are impacting the database design. The second one is hybrid retrieval that we see on the patterns. So for example, AI applications combine traditional structured queries with vector searches, right? A single request may span both of these patterns, right? From vector search for semantic relevance to SQL joins for business logic and filtering. And then you need real-time data retrieval for context freshness. And this is very, very fundamental to offering meaningful value for customers. So this hybrid pattern is, given how critical it is, one major utility company, which is based in the US, they use the geospatial infrastructure for monitoring. For example, the geospatial aspects of Postgres, given its extension model, makes it so powerful, right? Whether it is PG vector or geospatial. So they process millions of location-based queries daily for their pipeline safety and also grid management. They need a unified platform. One of the challenges they want to avoid is having two systems, trying to do one for vectors and another for operational databases and possibly a third one for analytics. So they want a combined system because it enables them to respond in seconds rather than minutes or even hours, right? And this is very critical as you look at critical industries out there. So this is what we are seeing. So the third is, as AI is evolving, the unpredictability of of the workloads, right? Agent-generated query patterns are very unpredictable, and this is very challenging from a database perspective. How do you respond to that, right? So this is where I think AI really changes the game, and how databases can play a very, very critical role. So LLM powered applications and AI generate queries that are dynamic based on user intent as well as the evolving goals. That is what we see. So unlike traditional queries, which are very fixed and and you can optimize, I think this is changing. So for example, we have worked with one of the energy management companies in Europe, and they wanted to modernize their Salesforce account hierarchy management, where the AI agent is generating these queries, and the queries are based on natural language requests, right? This is where some of the world is going towards as well. And the patterns are impossible to predict. So what we have seen is effectively Aurora Postgres, which has been central to how we address this request. So the customer was able to reduce their cost by about 60%, and what used to take about 7 minutes for their query processing, it can happen now in less than 3 minutes. So what does all this mean for agentic AI and database as a service, right? As organizations scale to thousands of agents, because agents calling other agents, right? The databases are becoming foundational to this strategy. And that puts databases at the center of this conversation and offering meaningful value to customers, right? So the ability for the database to serve as a shared persistent memory architecture that agents query for context and write decisions for auditability, because as you talk about agents, it is hard to separate out the security aspects of this, right? You need the fundamental value of a lot of relational databases, or relational databases in general, is the auditability and the security and the compliance aspects, so that it makes it easier. And you need to retrieve from for grounded responses. You need to get the same response every time you have the same query, right? Because one of the challenge with AI generated systems is the lack of predictability, or not having that 100% predictable results. And doing all of this in milliseconds.
No, love it. Thank you, and amazing setup. And so, Kamal, I do have a follow-up question to what Subbu was just saying here. And so, in looking through Honest Trade's case studies, you've got some great stories out there of some vector databases that you're bringing to cloud, that you bring. So when is it Postgres? When are we tokenizing and going vector? I mean, so in terms of talking to your customers and what you're seeing,
I think EG vector has gained more and more adoption over time, and the reason is simple, because if people prefer to just have the tooling that what they have and just consolidate with, as long as it keeps up with it over time. And I think that's the natural pattern I'm seeing. To your point, the way I see it is, long story short, is new access patterns are emerging. As a result, new tools emerge, and people jump onto that. Over time, people realize that, oh, these things are built on Postgres. Postgres catches up, and people move and migrate to Postgres and keep the thing simple. Now, it will be good to see how fast and whether Postgres can continue to keep up with it. Is it flexible enough to meet the needs of the future thing? Because there might be a tipping point where somebody will say, nah, we may have to look at completely reimagine the foundation of even the Postgres. I don't think so we are there yet, but I think that will be an interesting play of equation how the next 2-3 years play out. That's how I at least think about it.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Markus, one of the things that I heard Kamal say is Postgres, or more specifically the database, is kind of the operating system for modern applications moving forward. It's an interesting perspective because before it was the SaaS model, before that it was the VM or the Docker. What's the take from the European side? What are you hearing from your side? Is it the universe data?
So this is something that has shifted significantly over time. And to go straight to your point, I think when you look at software, especially SaaS software, right, it's also oftentimes the least common denominator that is, not differentiating one company from another one. So let's say you're using a SaaS application. That is something that all your competitors can actually do as well. And with that, they have like the business logic that is oftentimes baked into a SaaS application, just the same across all these businesses. And that's maybe for a good reason, because it sets some standards where you also don't want to differentiate. But what really makes you different as a company from other companies is the data that you are sitting on, right? So suddenly with the way it was easier to bring your own data into such an environment, in such an, let's say, agentic world, that suddenly allows you with your own data to come up with new and very custom specific, not use cases, but results, insights, and details. And here is, of course, the data store a super relevant source. And if you look at the startups that we are working with here, you might be surprised, but most of them actually are centered around the relational database in most of the cases, like 80+% of the cases that I'm aware of, it's actually Postgres. And the interesting bit here is you would think like, hey, the startups, that are starting fresh from the ground, they use all the purpose-built stuff that Kamal alluded to. But what they actually found is that, purpose-built means also you need multiple of them. Each of them comes with their own learning curve, right? And integrating them is tricky. So actually, the common denominator here is Postgres, and it has proven to be very flexible. So we have seen a lot of, challenges over time, be it the scalability challenge or, new data formats like vector searches or geo coordinate as searches. All of them got tackled by the community and the ecosystem that has evolved around Postgres. And so at the end of the day, I think this is where it all ties together, right? And bringing your own data into a world where agents can make sense out of it, that all is basically, closes the circle, so to say.
Aurora Postgres does support custom extension primarily through what is called as a trusted language extension framework. So that is very powerful, right? The smiling. So hopefully it brings back good old memories, right? So this is what makes Postgres so powerful, the extension model. The overall velocity of the community innovation brought together on a platform. And that is what makes Postgres so unique and valuable for customers, because even before you think something is missing and you realize that somebody at another part of the world has already written something and you don't have to spend all the time. And that is what is behind the momentum around Postgres and why customers see it as so compelling, right? Because you don't have to do very often build things from scratch. So having said that, coming to your question on the evolution of DBaaS market, look, I do not know as to what the landscape of the databases may look like several years down the road. But listening to customers, where they are challenged and how these platforms are coming together. Microsoft has its own challenges. Microsoft used to be the go-to platform many years back as part of the LAMP stack, right? Whenever I used to speak with any gaming customers or even fintech customers, the go-to used to be MySQL at one point in time. But Postgres has become the kind of the de facto choice for all the reasons that Markus called out as well. So we do see enormous momentum behind Postgres because of the community, because of the openness, because all things being equal, Customers do not want to be tethered to a proprietary platform. They want openness. Even when you look at the number of startups in the space and the recent acquisitions that have happened, they're all in the Postgres side of the house. So having said that, here is what I see happening based on some of the customer conversations that we have been having and the broader trends. One big change that I am seeing on how the volume and velocity of migrations to the cloud, because a lot of these experiments around agentic or AI in general aligns very nicely with what cloud can do, because you cannot bring up all of that on in your on-premises infrastructure, right? It is very expensive, and also the innovation is happening very fast in the cloud. So that is one. The second thing is we talked about this earlier. The relational databases are seeing a huge resurgence in excitement, the interest, and the amount of investment that is happening with a lot of new startups. And I think at the end of customers win, because every provider is pushing the other provider to come up with better features to make the life easier for the DBAs and from an operational perspective, and create more value for customers. So that is the second one that I see. And then the third one, of course, is we talked about this at some length on Agentic is fundamentally changing the requirements of a database. So one is if you have persistent memory, how do you gain access with millisecond retrieval? So that is becoming big. And then the second one is billion scale semantic search with grounded truth. For example, there is we work with one legal technology company, and they sit on about 20 to 30 years of legal records and related content. It was incredibly hard for them to search through or sift through all this data to provide insight. So what PG Vector and databases are doing is kind of summarize that, so that as folks start writing about, analyzing, it makes it so much easier. What used to take sometimes months is happening in minutes. Folks are sitting on all of the data. Data is very critical. Being able to up-level that and create meaningful things within the domain and bringing and making the data as a differentiating capability for these companies is very important. And that is what databases are able to do, along with all the security and the contextual and all the other things that we talked about.
As we get into kind of DBaaS, and so my kind of the follow-up question here, and Markus, I'll kind of go first to you, is, where are we at as it relates to database as a service? And so, how much of that what is the future in terms of when are you looking for someone to manage your database, and when are you saying, hey, listen, AI makes me an expert in everything. I'm a lawyer too, so now I'm a Postgres expert. So should I be running my own Postgres on my own clusters?
I mean, this is a question that I hear multiple times, and I think it has multiple dimensions to it. So first off, you can fall into the trap of thinking that by means of agents or LLMs, you will be the database expert in no time. But I think that's a big trap. So if you are running really a system that is critical for you or for your customers, then you are better off and have the expertise in-house or in-house in terms of somebody who is running it for you and knows what he is doing, rather than relying fully on knowledge that is LLM knowledge and maybe more general and needs some interpretation to be really helpful and useful on the spot. I'm not saying that these LLMs cannot do a great job in figuring certain things out, but given the criticality that we discussed before when it comes to data, then I think this is something that most of the startups, even the early stages that we are working with, for their production data, they certainly rely on a managed service and on experts to run these stuff. So the differentiation here comes into play when we are talking about what's happening in earlier stages of the development life cycle, right? Where they can potentially go and be a bit more risky when it comes to uptime of a database or performance of a database. And here, I think the new game that we see is coming up is, what if you need hundreds or thousands of these kind of databases, because each agent is now trying to modify code, is trying to test the modifications in code that they were doing. Is that still a game that you can run with the managed offerings? Is that something where you need new offerings coming up? And I think this is the name of the game. But if you look at the kind of commercial offerings, right, RDS and Aurora for certain, but also Neon, Supabase, and all the likes, there is obviously a strong market for managed offerings in this space.
Love it. And so, Subbu, I'm going to give you last. So, Kamal, one kind of follow-on question there. In your role at Honestly, you help companies bring managed services to market, and all of your customers then face the question of, hey, when should I be using a native AWS cloud service? When should I be, when is a more flexible but still managed service that I provide a better fit, and when should I do it yourself? And so, as we see, DBaaS moving forward, is it going to be a hard pivot? Are we all just going to go native, or where's that happy medium?
I think the world is changing really, really fast on many, many dimensions. So I think we touched upon earlier in the discussion about how some of the requirements and access patterns are changing. But if you take a look at it, and I'd love to get the Subbu's comment as well on this, is like, if you take a look at it from the go-to-market perspective, the pricing how the pricing is done is changing now, because they focus on more outcome-based pricing compared to 15 years ago, where it was infrastructure-based pricing or more passing on the cost kind of thing, right? Consumption-based. The second thing that if you take a look at from a different way, the deployment model itself is changing. Like RDS, when the time RDS was built, or some of these services, everything was in a hosted world, right? It was okay. Now with agents, because enterprises are having thousands and thousands of these agents, it's getting difficult for them as a consumers. I'm talking about enterprises as consumers, to open up their VPC to allow end vendors to come in. Now, AWS is not any vendor; it is the vendor. So I will excuse AWS into that list. But I'm just saying, just speaking about others, it's really hard. And so that deployment model itself is shifting. That's my broader point. And so while RDS, because it's backed by AWS, can live with the hosted world, the rest of the world is moving towards the BYOC, because especially for the small vendor who's trying to build a Postgres or something, another DBaaS service out there, they have no choice to live in the world where they offer a hosted like solution like RDS. They have to deploy in the customer's account. And I think the deployment model itself is completely changing from that perspective. Yet another perspective is coming from how interesting discussions that are happening in the regulatory world on how their data can be used and things, and that is imposing its own challenges on top. And these things are happening really, really fast, and many things are operating in parallel. So my follow-up question, so I'm just going to get up the question to the expert or the guest speaker here, like how Subbu, I'm pretty sure seeing that some of these things coming into the play, the push on, hey, I want to own the data, the push on all the regulatory requirements by European Union and other governments out there, the push towards the newer pricing models, especially with the agentic world, the newer AI access pattern. How is RDS addressing that? How about that? You are the business main business head for that. So what are your viewpoints on that?
Hey, plus one to the many things that you called out, right? One of the big announcements we did at reInvent was we decided to integrate Aurora as part of the Vercel marketplace, as well as what Vercel offers their customers. So what it enables is for customers to have this insurance to go from a POC all the way to production. And if they want to manage as part of RDS or whatever down the road, they have the ability to do so. And that partnership has been very meaningful for us as well as Vercel. We plan to extend it more broadly, but being able to offer best of breed for customers who have that use case, many SaaS companies use, being part of that journey as part of Vercel and other platforms is what makes RDS very unique. So that irrespective of where you are or how you want to build, being able to offer that, or a platform where hundreds of thousands of customers have bet their business on, and we being able to offer them at a scale and at a price performance and also at a very small price point is very, very meaningful. And this comes to the other thing that Kamal called about around economics. How are we thinking about that? The outcome-based pricing, right? Or consumption-based pricing. And this is where serverless V2 for Aurora really is very meaningful, with the ability to scale to zero and scale up, and having limitless database with Aurora. All these make it very, very meaningful and well aligned with how agents use databases as well, because you don't want a situation where your cost is unbound and then you are kind of your infra cost is totally out of bounds, right? This offers the ability. So financial construct is as important as you think about AI use cases and the agents calling other agents and you building databases, all these queries. So that becomes very critical. The other thing we kind of gave a significant thought to is around why should customers be tethered to individual databases, engines, or even instance families within our database ecosystem. And this was one of the biggest drivers to offering the database savings plan, so that customers can think about it more holistically at an aggregate level and say that, you know what, today I may be using RDS Postgres, tomorrow I may need Aurora Postgres, or it could be any one of those. For example, today I am on RDS commercial databases like Oracle or SQL Server, but my business demands that I modernize, right, to Postgres, right, to use all the other capabilities. Being able to seamlessly support that with a financial construct, with something like database savings plan has been really, really well received by our customers, and that is very exciting. So as the product evolves, even the commercial angle should evolve to support the business use cases. Otherwise, customers will be very challenged. And there have been some incredible innovations, right, on the database side that, for example, for ages, Aurora had this fast cloning capability. And now recently we launched the database masking with Aurora Postgres. Now think about it. You as an agent, you want to spin up something, you do a fast clone so that you get the latest production snapshot. You run database masking, so everything is anonymized, no PIs are exposed, and then you kill that. You do not pay for anything extra, right? Because the clone, you only pay for because of how it is constructed. You're not replicating the storage itself. And that is the beauty of what products can do, or how they can be a huge enabler for the innovation and accelerate customers' ability to serve their customers much better.
I love the last one. So are people then using OpenCloud? Just open my production database or data mask and say, hey, Eric, OpenCloud, do whatever you want. Let's see how far we can go.
Yes, as the agents evolve, right? I think you do not want to give it stale data as well. You want to give it something that's meaningful. So I see some promising patterns emerging.
Subbu, Kamal, Markus, thank you very much. I learn every time I listen to you guys talk. I hope our listeners did too. And so for those who listened all the way to the end, thank you very